Welcome to the Journal Editorial Report. I'm Paul Gigot. A new year and a new set of challenges for President Trump, both at home and abroad. We begin in the Middle East with the Pentagon confirming Thursday night that the powerful commander of Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps, General Qassem Soleimani, was killed in a U.S. drone strike near Baghdad airport. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo telling Fox on Friday that President Trump made a necessary decision.
There was an imminent attack. The orchestrator, the primary motivator for the attack was Qassem Soleimani. He's got hundreds of American lives, blood on his hands. But what was sitting before us was his travels throughout the region and his efforts to make a significant strike against Americans. We've been planning for this, and we're prepared.
Mark Dubowitz is chief executive of the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. Welcome. Good to see you again. So I was reading your Twitter feed, and I noticed that you were saying that this killing of Soleimani may be more significant even than the killing of Osama bin Laden. How so?
Paul, Qassem Soleimani for 23 years has dominated the Middle East. I mean, if you can imagine combination of our Joint Special Operations Commander with our Joint Chiefs of Staff, with our CIA Director and our Foreign Minister or Secretary of State, and you roll that all into one man, and that's Qassem Soleimani.
Really? So he had that much influence?
Huge influence, huge power, really somebody to be admired for his prowess and his operational capacity as well as his tactical brilliance. I mean, he really has created enormous difficulties for U.S. interests. As Secretary Pompeo said, he has American blood on his hand, as well as the blood of hundreds of thousands of Syrians and Iranians and Lebanese and Iraqis. This is a consequential move by the president, and President Trump really deserves enormous credit.
Let's talk about the impact in the Middle East. First of all, the impact inside Iran. The Ayatollah Khamenei had said before this that the U.S. could do nothing at all to stop what Iran did. Clearly, he was wrong about that. But what happens next in Iran? Are they going to strike back here? They're promising to do so.
Look, this was a severe blow to the Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. I mean, Soleimani was his left hand and his right hand. He was the second most powerful man in Iran after the Supreme Leader answered directly to him, not through the chain of command. And so the regime is going to have to strike back. And the real question is how and where. And they've certainly learned to their horror that President Trump, unlike previous presidents, is willing to enforce red lines, specifically a red line against taking U.S. casualties. And so I think they're going to have to be very careful about striking out at U.S. personnel or U.S. interests. But again, their playbook is to go after our allies, hit oil facilities, go after tankers. But Iraq will probably be the main battleground. They want to drive us out. And if they can drive us out, that certainly would be a testament to Soleimani. And that was, after all, Soleimani's objective, to drive the United States out of Iraq and out of the Middle East. I think that'll be the main battleground.
But I guess the question they face is, do you really target Americans? Do you target our diplomats? Do you target our military troops that are on the ground? We have about 5,000 of them in Iraq. Because if you do and you end up killing Americans, the message from this attack on Soleimani is, we will strike back. And I assume that would not be limited just to Iraq.
Well, I think that's exactly right. I mean, I think President Trump has made that very clear, again, that he will enforce the red line against the taking of American lives. And so that kind of escalation would be enormously risky for the regime, because they could be risking their military, they could be risking the survival of the regime itself. So again, their traditional playbook will maybe do everything short of that, go after U.S. allies, go after the assets of our allies, go after energy resources, and inside Iraq, perhaps create massive demonstrations, rally these Shiite militias, and certainly work against us politically to try and force the Iraqi government to force us out of that country.
Right, but there's a split point of view inside Iraq about the Iranian presence. I mean, some of the protests in recent weeks have been against the Iranian meddling in Iraq, although it is true that the Prime Minister denounced the American attack on Soleimani, and so did the Ayatollah Sistani, the Shiite leader. How do you see that playing out? I mean, do you think we'll be able to maintain a presence inside Iraq?
It's a good question. I mean, you're exactly right. I mean, actually, for months, hundreds of thousands of Iraqis, including especially Shiite Iraqis, have been on the streets protesting against Iran, against Iranian imperialism, yelling death to the dictator, Iran out of our country. And so certainly Iraqi nationalism has been fueled by the heavy hand of Iranian imperialism in that country. So it may be very difficult for the Iranians to rally the Iraqis around an Iranian flag. But again, politically, it'll be enormous pressure. The Popular Mobilization Unit, which has banded together all these Iranian-backed Shiite militias, has enormous influence in the Iraqi political system and in the Iraqi parliament. And so I expect that there will be moves to try and force this out politically and try to force the hand of the Iraqi politicians to defend Iran and defend Iraqi sovereignty and try to force us out of that country.
What's the larger impact of this in the Middle East more broadly? Because there's been real concern there, particularly after the president's pledge to get out of, impulsive move to get out of Syria twice, which he's twice taken back, that maybe he wants to get out. Does this send a reassuring message to some of the rest of the region?
Look, I hope it does, and I think it should, but it really depends on President Trump's next move. I mean, how does he respond to the regime's escalation? How does he respond to more violent attacks against our allies? If the message is you can go after our allies as long as you don't kill Americans, they're not going to be reassured. If the message is the United States is here to stay in the Middle East, we're going to be very selective but very deadly about how we use military force. We're not going to have a huge footprint, but the footprint we have will be there to defend U.S. interests and U.S. allies. Then I think it's quite a devastating blow to the regime in Iran, which did not expect this from Donald Trump.
Right.
Certainly did not expect this. I mean, I think no one expected this from Donald Trump. I mean, it was only 2 months ago that I was calling Donald Trump a Twitter tiger.
Right.
And now I take it back. I mean, I commend him for doing what no other U.S. president in 23 years was willing to do, which is to take out this master terrorists. So I think Donald Trump's next move is going to be the very important move, and that's the move that our allies and our adversaries will be looking at.
All right, Mark Dubowitz, very instructive. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks so much for having me, Paul.